This is The Right Approach. I'm JW Judge, and with me is my co-host Barbara Hinsky. This is a podcast for writers to learn more about the craft of writing as we explore a new topic every week. Our guest today is Robert Dugoni, the New York Times bestselling author of The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hale, The World Played Chess, and most recently, the ninth book in his Tracy Crosswhite series, What She Found. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
I have, so last night, our golden retriever had a very upset stomach and kept me up much of the night. So I had a lot more time to reflect on all the things I want to talk about today than I had intended. So what I'd like to start with is, can you give the listeners a little bit of background about your journey into getting novels picked up and published? Because, if somebody goes and looks at your author page on Amazon or your website, it's incredible. I mean, really. And, somebody could get the idea that there's no way they can achieve that kind of commercial success. But since you and I have talked a couple of years ago on a previous podcast that I was doing, I know that that road wasn't without its potholes.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And I do a lot of teaching on the craft of writing, and I tell my students all the time, it wasn't that long ago that I was sitting in that audience, trying to absorb as much as I could about the craft, because I could write. I was a lawyer. I wrote for the LA Times, and I could write, but I didn't know about the craft of writing. So it is misleading. And I can remember going and looking at writer pages and thinking, wow, this guy, this woman, they're an overnight success. And I have in all the years I've been doing this, the 25 years I've been doing this, I've met one person that was an overnight success. And it's really one of the more bizarre stories you'll ever hear. The more common story is my story, which is, you have a desire to write, and you have a desire to pursue writing, but you also have a desire to eat and to have a roof over your head. So you take a road more traveled. In my case, I took the legal job. I went to law school. I became a lawyer. I made good money, but that desire to write never left. Really, I had it since the seventh grade. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So, what I did is, as I tried to write on the side while I was practicing law, which is, nearly impossible. Being a lawyer is not a job, it's a profession. And that means there are no set hours. And that means there are weeks and months where you're working 80-hour weeks when you're in trial and those things. So, what I had to do was really, I had to take a sabbatical. And devote myself to the craft. And what I found was I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a novel. And that was the first step, was putting myself in a room full of other writers at conferences, in writers groups, and finding out what I didn't know, and then taking a step back and giving myself sort of an MFA. I'd walk down to the Elliott Bay Library, which was in Pioneer Square at the time, and I'd sit on the floor in the how-to section, and I'd literally read books on the craft. And if the book spoke to me, if it contained information that I thought was practical and useful, then I'd buy the book. And that went on for quite a while. My first book was published in 2004, and I left the practice of law in 1999. I believe. So, there's a good 5 years there where, there was a struggle. And then, once you get an agent and once you get a book published, it doesn't end there. It's like practicing law. You're only as good as your last trial. Well, you're only as good as your last book. And readers can be finicky. So, once you're out there and you're publishing, your job then is to make the next book better than the book before it.
Well, so I want to pick up on that. And you have been releasing a couple of novels a year for several years. And I saw, as I was going through your book list today, that you've already got a couple that are slated for release next year in 2023.
Yeah.
So do you mind talking about your writing process and what you're doing on a daily basis, and maybe that changes from one day to the next, or I don't know.
Well, it does change from one day to the next, but the thing that doesn't change is I go to work every day. And I think that's the thing I learned from being a lawyer is I learned how to put my butt in a chair and go to work every day. I don't need someone to motivate me. I took 4 days off for the Thanksgiving holiday, and I was so eager to get back to my desk and sit down and get back into the story that I'm working on, that I got up, I woke up early, and so I'm a guy that I work out 5, 6 days a week. I also play golf when I can, when it's not snowing, in the afternoons, and I walk the golf course. And the reason I do that is I'm a guy that has low levels of anxiety. Long story short is I had a stroke in 2016, and one of the ramifications of my stroke was I had these low levels of anxiety. It's nothing that I can't live with, but I found that exercise is really important to me. So I make time to exercise. But other than that, I'm at my desk, and I'm at my desk as 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours a day. You write, and you notice, like, you reach that point where suddenly the sentences start becoming, see Sam run and see Spot sit, and you start realizing, okay, I need to stop. But until I reach that point, I'm at work and I'm writing. And one of the things that I have come to realize is there's a lot of things you can do. Looking at contracts and all those kinds of things. I've been asked several times if I'm interested in writing the screenplays to some of my books, and my answer is always no, because I think it's important to understand what you do well and to do that. And the thing I do well is write novels, and that's where I focus. All of my attention is on my next novel.
I think that is so wise. I've had people tell me, stay in your lane of genius. Just because maybe you could do something, and as lawyers, we're used to learning lots of things in depth about lots of different topics. But just because you can doesn't mean you should or you're most productive. I wanted to ask you about your writing or your walking habit, because I find walking is just crucial to my writing process. That moving your arms in opposition, science behind that is very helpful. When you walk, do you think about your work in process, or do you use that as a time to clear your brain of all that?
Well, I set out with the intent of clearing my brain. But I think what you're talking about is very true, which is that when you are exercising, the endorphins start moving, flowing, and everything starts to just percolate. And I think that's when we're at our best creatively. And so for me, a lot of times epiphanies will strike me when I'm walking, when I'm exercising. And I'll have to get a notepad and write down that epiphany, so that I always think I'm going to forget it, But what you're talking about has also been scientifically proven. They have talked about how repetitive action spurs creativity. And when you golf, that's all golf is. Golf is repetitive action. You walk to the ball, you stand over the ball, you get in your golf posture, you take a practice swing, you hit the ball, you walk to the ball, and it's repetitive action. And there's been science that has talked about how that can really help facilitate creativity.
And I find for me that even doing chores, whether that's yard work, pulling weeds, which some people just hate, and for me, it's time that I can do a really mindless activity and my brain just wanders and thinks. And like the other night, this was 2 nights ago, I'm doing laundry, folding clothes, and I am about 85% done with my fourth novel. I'm into the third act and thinking ahead about how this thing is going to close out. And I just had this, I think it's a brilliant idea. We'll figure it out if it is or not. But I had this moment of clarity about something that needs to happen in the climactic scene that hadn't occurred to me before. And I stopped what I was doing and ran to my laptop and typed out a few words, and so that I would not forget to include it later. And so walking and exercise Absolutely. And sometimes it's just those other mindless activities that life requires too.
Yeah, and you know, we all need that. We all need that. You know, there are times when I get done with a full day and, you know, I'll be home with my wife. My kids are now grown, and she'll say, "You're awfully quiet." And, you know, she's right. But, you know, when you get that mental fatigue
Yeah.
where literally someone will say, you know, do you want to watch a movie? And my thought is, I do not want to spend 2 hours concentrating on some movie. Give me a 30-minute sitcom or a 30-minute, you know, something, because my brain is just fried. And I think, you know, I think we have to respect that. And that's what I mean when, you know, I'll be working and I know when the muse says I'm going to sleep, or when the muse says I'm going away, that's when I will switch gears, and I might look at some other things. I might do a little bit of social media, whatever the situation is. But you know, you kind of have to respect the body.
And
I am so glad to hear you say that thing about I can't watch a movie, because my husband and I, my kids are older and grown and gone too. So my husband and I will watch TV after dinner. That's our time together. And it's fun as a writer to see other storytelling, but I do not have a 2 hour project in me. Do
Yeah,
not. And he's like,
yeah.
really? It's mindless to watch a movie. Well, I'm going to play this part of the clip for him and say,
Yeah.
look, see? Hey, thank you.
so I didn't plan to talk about social media today, but I do want to comment that your use of Instagram is a really great combination of just like the personal stuff you do, going to ball games, going to conferences, that sort of thing, but also promoting the books. And you just intertwine those things really well.
Thank you. It's a, you know, it's a skill that takes a lot of learning. If I was not in this profession, I don't know that I'd be on social media, because it can really be exhausting. And I learned a valuable lesson uh, during my course of doing social media. And I really have reached a point now where my social media is for joyous things, happy things, fun
Mhm.
things. I don't want to get into discussions on politics. I don't want to get into discussions on, you know, controversial topics. Some people do. That's their platform. That's their voice. That's not what I want to do. And so I really try to focus on things that are positive, things that are upbeat, you know, things that people want to, you know, so many of people out there, I'm sure, like me, is they look at their social media at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you know, do you really want to get bombarded with, you know, some of the really horrible news that's going on in the world? I think there's a time and a place for it, but for me, it's not in social media.
So, where I wanted to spend a lot of time in our conversation today is you started your early novel writing. A lot of that was with legal thrillers. And then, from what I can tell, you really broke through to readers with your police procedurals,
Yeah.
with that Tracy Crosswhite series. Um, and then several years later, you you're having all this commercial success, and then you go and write a book like The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hale, which is a literary novel,
Right.
not an inaccessible one. I mean, some of them are inaccessible. This one definitely is not. But I'm really curious about the conversation with your agent and then later your publisher, where you are very well known and successful in this one area. And then you tell them, hey, I'm writing or want to write this entirely different genre. And what was that conversation like? What was the response?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, necessity is the mother of invention, right? My legal thriller series with David Sloan got dropped by my publisher, and I found myself in a place where, you know, 5 books in, I had to reinvent myself, and so I really looked at the market. What was the biggest market out there? And the biggest genre market out there is erotica. I didn't want to write erotica. So I looked at what was next. And it was really, you know, romance and police procedurals. And I had some contacts that it made sense. Police procedurals made sense. There's a lot of legal elements involved and in that I could understand it. And I had some great contacts. And so I had this idea, and I sort of began to pursue Tracy Crosswhite, who just came to me. And then I had some things that happened in my life that really were epiphanies for me with regard to my writing career. And one was to stop trying to outline my books. I found that, you know, outlining my books for 3 months was a waste of time, because the minute I started writing, I was off my outline. Now, some people, it works for them. And so I never say outline, don't outline. I say do what works for you. And what worked for me was writing from the heart, writing from the seat of my pants, letting my characters tell me their story and get going. And I had this story, The Extraordinary Life of Sam Howell. And it was one of those stories, which, like Stephen King talks about in his book on writing, and Charles Dickens talks about in his, you know, the biography that was written about him. It was one of those stories where this little kid just started talking to me. He just started telling me the story. Does it have some basis in reality? Of course it does. I grew up in Burlingame. Sam grew up in Burlingame, but I'm one of 10 kids. Sam's an only child. It's not me. And so I just let this kid talk to me. And, you know, as far as my agent and my editors went, I think when you have commercial success, you have a better opportunity to say, I'd like to try to do something differently. There's no question about that. But I also think that I have an agent team and an editorial team that is incredibly smart and incredibly generous and giving. And when I went to them with this book, The Extraordinary Life of Sam Howell, they never said to me, no, 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 no. What they said to me was, yes, but let's figure out a way to do it where the people expecting another police procedural are not disappointed, are not angry, and the people that come to you through the literary world will say to themselves, I wonder what else he's written. And so they were very smart about it, and they were very strategic about it. And, you know, I don't want this to sound egotistical, because I'm not putting myself on this level at all. But I always envisioned myself to be more like Stephen King than Lee Child. Lee writes fabulous books, but I don't know that he's written anything other than the Jack Reacher series. That's not a knock in any way, shape, or form. Those are fantastic novels. They've sold hundreds of millions of copies. And he's a great guy, very generous guy. But King has written everything. And more recently, he's begun to write, you know, sort of literary, or at least contemporary fiction. The Green Mile, 11/22/63, Fairy Tale, which, you know, I'm reading now. And that's always what I wanted to do as a storyteller, is I wanted to just tell the story that was being told to me without limitations.
That's really encouraging, because, you know,
Yeah.
I had a thought that I wondered if there was any response that, you know, the publisher said, we don't know how to sell this coming from you. But it doesn't sound like that was their approach at all.
No, and in fact, we talked about even using a pen name. And then they said, you know, well, how do you feel about that? They left it to me. And I said, I think my readers will follow me, and I think I will gain new readers. I just think we have to be strategic and smart about the marketing. And if there's one thing that Amazon Publishing is, it's smart. I mean, they are very smart, and they are very intuitive, and they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the market. And so I felt very comfortable that they would take care of me and do this in a way that didn't piss off my readers of my police procedural series.
Well, and when you look at, and you've got Sam Hale, you have The World Played Chess, which is a coming of age story in which Vietnam is a central component. And then you also have your thrillers and your police procedurals. And what you were talking about, your publisher being smart, is there's consistency across all of those different brands and those different genres, but there's also distinctions that let the reader know that this is a different thing. And I just think that it's really impressive to be able to have all of that under the one name, and it all fits under who you are. but there's a distinction so that people know what they're getting.
Yeah, I first I appreciate the compliment. It's very kind of you, but you're on a more tutorial level of, as a podcast is. I think that's the most important thing, is to just play fair with your reader. Don't try to sneak a book in that to your reader that they're not going to like, because they have the ability now to go online and let everybody know that what you're doing. So I think it's a matter of just playing fair with the reader.
I skimmed through some of your reviews on the other two that aren't in your procedural series, and it looks like the readers knew what they were getting, because you don't get any snarky comments.
Yeah,
so
I think they did.
Whole thing, and you were smart about it and strategic about it.
And The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, other than my new Tracy book that comes out, it remains my best-selling novel month after month after month.
Wow.
Because literary novels have a different flow than genre fiction. In genre fiction, especially a series, people are waiting for the next book. And so when it comes out, it just sells, and boom, and it spikes. And then you have a lull. And then 2, 3, 4 months in, when it gets on a discount, it spikes again. The literary novel is really a word of mouth process. And it's a lot of book clubs saying to other people, hey, have you read this book? It is a great book club pick. And then that book club will pick it up. And one of the positives that came out of this whole COVID thing was Zoom. I have probably done, well, I know that I did 70 book clubs in 2019. And I think I did about the same in 2020, 2021. And I continue to do a lot of book clubs and a lot of podcasts and things like this, because it's easier to do. It's a simple thing. So, if somebody in New Hampshire has read The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell and they ask me if I'll come on, my answer is always, yes, because A, it's an honor to have somebody read your work, and B, it's easy. It's an easy thing to do, to jump on the screen. So Sam Hell continues to really sell very, very well. And I think it will for a long, long time, because of the subject matter and because of the word of mouth that continues to spread.
That leads me to a question. How much of the marketing of your books do you do, or is most of it on your publisher's plate, or do you play a real active role in all that, in sourcing the book clubs and all of that, or you have a PR person that does that?
Yeah, I would say that 75-80% of it is my publisher, but I am always included. I have a publicity call on Wednesday of this week for the next book that's coming out, which is a new legal thriller with a new defense attorney, a female defense attorney. I'm hoping that it's going to be a series.
And what's the name of this book?
So that one's called Her Deadly Game.
Okay.
And the main character is a woman, by a young attorney, 30 years old, by the name of Robert Dugoni. And she works in the prosecuting attorney's office, has a bad relationship with her boss, and has to leave and goes to work for her father's defense firm, which she swore she'd never work at because her father's an alcoholic and her sisters who work there are completely dysfunctional. But she finds herself working at this defense firm, and she gets a murder trial, murder defense. So that's coming out. So they will say, hey, we're going to have a publicity meeting. They want me involved. They want my agents involved. We all get on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and we go through all the marketing. But I will say this, they are really, really bright, and they are really young and aggressive and forward thinking. Every single marketing meeting I have, they have something new that they're going to try. A podcast, a book club, large scale book club, an advertisement in some. I mean, they always are trying something new. I had a book come out. It was In Her Tracks, So that was the 7th, I think, book in the Tracy Crosswhite series. Well, if you go on Amazon, you'll see it has something like 25,000 reviews. And on Goodreads, it might be close to 100,000, which is more than some of the books before that. So why did that book just take off? Well, it was something that Amazon did in their publishing and their algorithms and in their marketing. And that's what I mean about them being just incredibly smart, because they'll keep trying new things until they find the things that work. So I'm always anxious to talk with them, because I'm always anxious to see what they have in store, what they're going to do. And then I field a lot of emails myself that come to me, people saying, we read your book, we'd love to have you come on and be a part of our book club on this date or that date. And those are the things that I do. And podcasts like this, I meet JW, and it's a great opportunity to come on and talk writing.
So I want talking writing. I want to get back to a specific question that I have a follow-up for already about writing police procedurals. And you've written, is your 10th book coming out in Tracy Crosswhite next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's got next year.
So you've written 10 of them. Police procedurals is a genre that is so well established, and readers have certain expectations. What do you do to keep it fresh and meet the expectations, but also, subvert them or have a twist or something that keeps it fresh and interesting?
Well, first of all, Tracy is always evolving. I think at 60 years of age, that's the one thing I've learned in life is we're always evolving. We're always finding ourselves in another bend in the road, meeting new people, having new friends. I have a good friend. He's 80 years old. He's a writer. And I just met him about 2 years ago. I was up on the driving range and he was there, and he saw my Stanford shirt, and he went to Stanford, and we started chatting, and we've become good friends. And, he said something to me. He said, if you ever told me that at 80 years of age, I would make a good new friend, I would have said, no way, I have my friends, boom. But you do. And he was open to it, and I was open to it. And so you meet new people, you meet new things. And so that's what Tracy is. Tracy is a person that is always evolving. She's evolving both professionally and in her personal life. She's gone from active cases to cold cases for reasons that work, because her boss and she don't get along. But this next book is really going to blow people away in that regard, and I'm excited about it. Her Final Kill, which will be out next year. And I will keep writing Tracy as long as she keeps evolving and things are interesting and new cases. And that's kind of the beauty of legal thrillers and police procedurals, is there's always another case. There's always another, crime to solve. And it's just a matter of working it in a way that is intriguing. I have some really great experts, and the book that's coming out, the legal thriller that's coming out, Her Deadly Game. I called up, my buddy who's a former Edmonds police officer. He was on the terrorism task force. He's done a lot of things. And I said, I'm really looking for something, a twist. And this is what I'm kind of trying to do. And he said, I got it. I got one for you. Let me get back to you. I gotta talk to a guy. Let me get back to you. And I think it's a really cool twist that we came up with. So, that's the fun part of writing, is the exploration. I mean, for me, writing is a process of discovery. And when I have those moments at the computer where my character says something funny, or that and I'm not expecting it, those are really wonderful moments for, I think, any writer.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people who don't write may even find hard to believe. Is I can't tell you, I mean, I'm only writing my 4th novel, but I can't tell you the number of times that during the course of a writing session, I have been surprised by what happens next. Like, I'll go in thinking I know how things are going to go. I know what's going to be said and how we're going to move this to the next thing. And then things will take a turn, and you're like, all right, well, I wasn't expecting that, but okay,
yeah,
let's go.
Yeah. And the other thing is, sometimes the muse hits you over the head. You know, I won't, I have two stories, but this second story is shorter. So I'm working on a book now, and it takes place back in 1938 and 1941, 1942, a World War II book. It's going to be a historical, so something new for me. Um, and there's a young woman in there, and this young woman feels, you know, compelled to do something in the war effort. And there was limited options for women back then, but she feels this compulsion. And so she's in this small little town, and she's running the movie projector in the only theater. That's what her boyfriend, who's now fighting in the war, that's what he used to do. And they had these moments in the projector room. He wanted to marry her, etc. And so what movie is she going to watch? Well, I don't know. I go on, I look up 1942, what's a Casablanca. And I think, yeah, okay. So I put Casablanca in there, and I don't think much of it until I get up this morning and I'm going through it. Well, what is Casablanca all about? It's about Ingrid Bergman giving herself for a higher purpose in the war, is doing something to help the war effort. She loves Rick, she loves Rick, but she can't be with Rick because there's a war going. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, that's exactly, it's like the muse was hitting me over the head. This is why she picks this movie, because it applies to her. So I think sometimes being a writer just means we have to be open to the muse and what the muse is trying to tell us.
Yeah.
When you're writing a historical fiction, or before that, The World Played Chess, and a thing that you haven't written before, a genre, a style of book, is there a different kind of anxiety or stress that you experience from whenever you write, Tracy Crosswhite, or the spy thriller books, things that you are more comfortable with that process?
I think it's always terrifying to sit down at a computer and look at a blank screen and say, I got to fill 400 pages. But research is not just about setting, and research is not just about gadgets or whatever you want to call it. Research is about scene study. Your scenes, my scenes, come out of my research. I did a tremendous amount of research for The World Played Chess because I wanted to honor the Vietnam veterans who had been there by writing something that was true, and that they would be proud of. I didn't serve in Vietnam. I didn't serve in the military, and I didn't want to hijack somebody else's story. But I wanted Vietnam veterans to be able to identify with the characters and say, that's what it was like, and be glad that someone was writing about it. So I did a tremendous amount of research, and of the 15 or 16 scenes that are in Vietnam, all those scenes came out of my research. So I always caution people I caution writers that no matter what you're writing, and no matter how much you feel like you know the material already, do the research, and your scenes will come out of that research.
I think that is a perfect place to bring this to a close. But before we do that, I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to know where to follow you and find your books, because they definitely need to read them. I have them in my Kindle, and I think everybody should pick it up because you're clearly a gifted writer. You put the work in, and I've enjoyed what I've read from you. So if you'll tell people where to follow you and find your books.
Sure. Thank you very much. So just, my website is robertdugonibooks.com. You can find me on Amazon at Robert Dugoni Books, as well. I'm on social media, at Robert Dugoni, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those common places that people. And my website has a lot of material for those people that are literary novels. There's book club questions that are on there and things like that. So those are the most likely places you'll find me.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I've really loved the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.